So welcome everyone to our March 15th work session. Actually back in person, very strange. So our first item tonight is equity regarding our public contracting rules, which will be updated by John Henningsen and Kelly Tucker.
Good afternoon, councilors and mayor. Kelly and I have been working as a team for the last several months to draft proposed changes to our public contracting rules. So we're going to be talking about those a little bit today and just giving you a bit of background on those. So just wanted to give you a bit of an overview and equity and public procurement and why we're taking a look at these rules today. The Oregon Revised Statute allows for a public agency to design a what's referred to as an affirmative action plan to ensure equal opportunity in employment and business for persons otherwise disadvantaged by reason of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, or physical or mental disability, or to create a policy to give a preference awarding public contracts to disabled veterans. Equity in public procurement is important and an area of focus for us because historically small businesses, including women and minority-owned businesses, have not received the same contract opportunities from public agencies that larger firms have received. Small businesses make up a large part of the Portland metropolitan business community. They provide local jobs, and they are a vital part of our regional economy. So this is an area of concern for us and the reason why we're bringing these rules before you today. The state of Oregon has something known as COVID. It's the State of Oregon Certification Office for Business Inclusion and Diversity.
I'm guessing they named that before 2020.
I've been asked if we misspelled that other word.
Yeah.
I assure you we didn't. But they may want to consider renaming it after this these last few years. But it's the Office for Business Inclusion and Diversity. A business meeting specific eligibility criteria can become certified and increase opportunities to earn public contracts and purchases. There's an online directory which lists all COVID certified businesses in the state. Businesses eligible for COVID certification include minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned businesses, as well as emerging small businesses. And those businesses, depending on the type of certification, may be in the state of Oregon or are not based in the state of Oregon. Any business can apply depending on the criteria for that specific certification.
And do they size out at a certain size? I looked at the emerging small business, the link, there was a link in there to the statute about how this tier 1 and tier 2 or whatever. But does that apply to all the businesses? Do they size out of being eligible, or do they, a minority or woman-owned business could be 1,000 people and still be?
They can size out, and also it depends on the volume of business they do. So they can size out both in terms of the number of employees as well as the actual dollar amount. It depends on the type of business. We didn't really dive into that because there's a lot of different variation there. Also, there's a time limit. So certain businesses can only be eligible for a certain amount of time. So there are a couple of different factors in terms of sizing or timing
it. So part of when we were looking into how we would create equity and add equity into our public contracting rules, we kind of broke it out by procurement method. And we used Metro as well as Portland State University's equity and public contracting as kind of a model when we created those changes that you'll see here. So for kind of breaking it down here for you guys by the procurement method, the small and direct appointment would apply for goods and services that are under $10,000, as well as personal services. And that kind of splits out. If it's architect and engineering related, it would be under $100,000. And if it's another other professional service, it would be under $50,000. That's the direct appointment limits for personal services. But the way we would propose it is that for small and direct appointment procurements, it would be optional. We would ask that staff consider eligible businesses, either from the COVID directory that they can find online, or of course contacting any known businesses that are certified. And we hope to kind of keep a running list on our own as well of that. For intermediate procurements, this is going to be goods and services that are under $150,000, or on the personal service side, for architect and engineering, it's under $250,000, and other professionals, $150,000. Again, it would be optional for intermediate procurements. So we would ask staff to consider eligible businesses, again, from the COVID directory, Or also making sure that they're including any known certified businesses when they're issuing the solicitation or distributing it out. Staff could choose to include equity and applicable scoring in any intermediate procurement. So even though we're proposing it that it be optional, of course, we can require it at any time. And for our formal procurements, these would be our request for proposals, invitations to bid with a quality piece to it. We would require it. So we're proposing that it must include an equity and diversity element in the solicitation and selection criteria. This would apply to goods and services that are over $150,000, personal services over $250,000 if it's architect and engineering, and $150,000 if it's other professional, and public improvements that are procured through an alternative method. So this is our construction management, general contractor, or a design build, basically any alternative method that has a quality consideration to it. And what we're proposing is that at least 20% of the total available scoring points of that solicitation be based towards equity and inclusion criteria. We would also, within that solicitation, require contractors to submit monthly project reports on how they utilize COVID certified businesses. So these would be like subcontractors. And we would also propose to add an equity and fairness statement in all the solicitations that are formal. And we're looking to signify the city's intent to provide maximum opportunities to COVID certified businesses. So we'll go into a little bit on how we are proposing the scoring breakdown. So as I mentioned, we would ask that at least 20% of the total available scoring points be based on one or more equity inclusion specific criteria. So what does that mean? This could mean that we are asking whether they're COVID certified. We could also include things like what their business demographics are, what support they have for their workforce diversity, their utilization of COVID certified subcontractors, if that's applicable, and other criteria. So this could be things like what type of DEI work are they doing within their organization? And we could award points based on that as well. So we do have some excluded procurements that we would propose as part of these public contracting rule changes. One of them would be emergency procurements. So emergency procurements are circumstances that were unforeseen. We've only declared 3, I think, to my knowledge. COVID was one of them. The Kellogg Bridge, structural integrity stuff that we had a few years back due to flooding was one. So we don't do them often. So this would be things that there's a risk of loss to property or loss to city services. And there's not a lot of time to do competitive processes. But we would still encourage departments to review the online COVID certification directory for those businesses and contact any known ones, even in an emergency procurement situation. And we would also attempt to locate qualified businesses to provide us a quote for goods or services, even though it's not required. Public improvements for construction would be another exemption. And the reason for this is that those contracts are awarded to the lowest price bid. So there isn't any other criteria factor in it right now. It's just lowest bid. And then some other procurements that might be exempt from competitive process are ones that are already currently exempt within our procurement rules. And that would be like price agreements through the state or another cooperative organization or sole source procurements.
Because COVID is such a big driver in both these rules and also how a lot of other procurements are handled across the state, there was some feedback we received about the difficulty in getting a COVID certification. The process is a bit onerous, can be pretty invasive, and it can be a challenge for owners, business owners. So based on that feedback and based on a desire to encourage businesses to get that certification so that it does open doors for them. We propose a waiver for COVID certification. It's a one-time waiver that would allow for any business not currently COVID certified, but who would otherwise meet that eligibility to be considered for our purposes as COVID certified. It's a 6-month waiver. And it's designed to assist businesses in determining if they are eligible. So we ask them a series of questions that are based on the current COVID rules. Basically, we've streamlined all of the different types of ways you can be certified into one process. And so based on that, they can sort of find out, do I qualify? Might I qualify? Or no, I don't qualify. So we've tried to give them, use as an opportunity to educate a business owner as to whether they should actually attempt to get COVID certified and to show them the value in that. Again, the waiver only applies to procurements issued by the city. It is valid for 6 months. And we anticipate that eligible businesses would then pursue COVID certification in order to continue to receive that benefit from the city as well as other entities with public contracting. Another component of this is outreach, because we know that there are businesses out there who are people who might want to go into business who would otherwise be eligible, but who might be intimidated about reaching out to a city. They just may not recognize that there's an opportunity to work with us. And so we wanted to do 2 forms of activities, both internal and external. That includes outreach, so engaging in businesses, letting them know about solicitations, holding open houses, workshops, and soliciting feedback from those who receive awarded contracts from us. What would make this easier? What got your attention? What helped? What didn't help? What are obstacles so that we can improve our processes as we move forward? Providing technical assistance, so providing guidance and information to businesses on options for bonding, insurance, COVID certification itself, as well as our city's procurement processes. So just making it easier to understand how we work, how our decisions are made, and how companies can better compete for those bids in the future. Package contracting opportunities, so examining all alternatives for projects to increase opportunities, such as dividing smaller project tasks into separate contracts, or awarding points to bidders that identify COVID-certified businesses to be used for subcontracted work. One of the things that Kelly mentioned is that for public improvement contracts, because those are based on low bid, there really is an opportunity to use the point benefit there. But there might be a way to take that, what would normally be a public improvement contract, and repackage it. So there may be elements of that that could be bid that way, that would still provide that additional access to COVID certified or COVID eligible businesses. Internal education, of course, providing training to city staff to ensure awareness of equity inclusion objectives within public procurement and those alternative options to help funnel those contracts through that process that would benefit those businesses. Contract requirements, considering insurance and bonding requirements to maximize competition. And reporting, issuing an annual report that includes total dollars spent on contracted goods and services and the percentage of those paid to disadvantaged businesses.
So in addition to the equity element that we're proposing in the public contracting rules, there's other changes that just need to be done. It's just standard process. It's been a little over 3 years since we did this last, so there's a few other things that could be updated and makes sense to do it at the same time. So one of the things is just updating some of our definitions. We're also looking to update the submittal option so that we include electronic submissions. Obviously, that changed a lot with in the last couple of years, so we just want to make sure that they are accounted for and the options and requirements are clear in the rules. We're making some updates to our general conditions for construction. So as you guys may know, we mostly follow the Oregon Department of Transportation's construction standards. However, we do have our own Milwaukie modifications that go into that. And so we're going to update that with some of the things that ODOT has updated, including expanding discussion topics for pre-construction conferences, adding project restrictions for on-site work, as well as cleanup requirements on the sites. We're proposing some updates to our personal property disposition procedures, including increasing property value by $500 for department heads to declare items as surplus, as well as just the steps for our internal authorizing documents. We're looking to clarify some of the procedures and thresholds for our procurements that use federal dollars. Of course, we've talked about the equity procedures and requirements, and we're looking to propose updating inclusive language and pronouns within our rules as well as our contract documents.
Expanding on that, staff is proposing to add language to all contracts for any written product or deliverable that is generated by the contract, and for the contractor to update any non-inclusive language, phrase, or word in existing documents that is presented to the city or the public. The proposed language is, I'm just going to read it because the city is deliberately playing its part to increase awareness for equity and inclusion in its organization, community, and beyond. Contractors shall make all efforts to update, remove, or change any non-inclusive terminology, phrases, or words to inclusive and equitable language for any written and presented deliverables resulting from this agreement.
And then just some other items kind of on the same topic of equity. With the proposed changes internally, we would be creating templates for our intermediate and formal solicitations that would have all the equity and inclusion suggestions and requirements in there, but it would also have tips for the departments, things that they can consider that they might not otherwise think of on their own. We just want to get as much resources out to the staff and the departments as possible on this. And these could be things like considering awarding points to business that engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts within their organization, or providing details of their ongoing equity training and development within their business. So those are some of the things that we could add into the template. It just makes the internal process of getting that solicitation ready a little easier. I think I mentioned this a little bit before, but yes, we would like to maintain a list of COVID certified businesses that respond to city solicitations. And that's whether they're awarded or not awarded. We want to track those that have responded and are interested in doing business with the city, and have just another resource for staff to go to outside of the state's directory, but our own for those who have responded. We're also hoping that staff will consider utilization requirements for contractors to subcontract some portion of the performed work, or provided materials to be provided by a COVID certified service disabled veteran owned business or an emerging small business. Kind of in line with what John mentioned a little bit ago about the public improvement contracts and how they're awarded to lowest bid, where this would be a good opportunity to include some kind of equity piece in it. We could require a certain portion of that project or certain amount of materials for that project go through COVID certified businesses. Adhere to that commitment, there would potentially be penalties, one of which is we could terminate the contract. So if they're being awarded points, the thought is that they're being awarded points partly based on whether they're certified or the type of commitment they're making toward, like, back up. Like, if part of what we asked for was what their key team looked like on this project and what diversity it had in there, and then that didn't come through in the end. That wasn't what was promised up front, and partly what they might have been awarded the contract on. So we would like avenues to perhaps penalize that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, so forgive me, but prevailing wage. We pay prevailing wage on all of our contracts, right?
Not all of them. There are some exclusions, but all public improvements, as well as some public works.
And then do we hold and somehow check that subcontractors are also paying prevailing wage?
We generally check tier 1, like so the first tier of subcontractors, but if the subcontractor had a subcontractor, we generally are not checking that level. So our primary contractor and the tier 1 should be providing certified payroll.
So, talking about breaking down these projects, potentially having, I just want to make sure that gets rolled in so that we make sure that we're still requiring prevailing wage.
Yes. Yeah, since prevailing wage requirements are a state law, that would not go away. I believe that there is something with the code, and we can look into it more, but there is something with one of the COVID certifications where they might be exempt from it. So, let's see.
Okay, thanks.
Open for discussion and questions.
I have a question. When you talk about barriers for COVID, do the folks who run COVID know, have they heard about the barriers that are in place? And are they trying to do things to eliminate those barriers so folks can apply for the certification?
That's a great question. COVID is run by the state of Oregon, and there are several elements of it that we really found could use an update. One of the issues that came up as we were researching this is what happens if a transgender person approaches us and says, I'd love to be certified, but do I qualify? We don't have an answer for that based on the rules that have been published by the state. Based on what we're proposing, if someone comes to us and they present themselves as a female business owner, we are going to give them the waiver based on that qualification if they meet the other criteria there. We're also going to be very honest with them that we don't know if they will receive that same qualification from the state because the state has not updated their rules to address it. The state of Oregon has 3 legal genders that you can have on your driver's license or birth certificate. It is silent on gender X and what that means for these certifications. So we would love to see the state address both some of the challenges that have come forward, have been brought forward, as well as some of the just outdated language or lack of detail in the process. There may be some reasons why the state has not made those changes. I can't speak for them as to why. Obviously, they don't want anyone to just sort of say, "Oh yeah, sure, I qualify," and get the certification, then crowd out legitimately eligible businesses. So we understand why there's a barrier there. But if the barrier is so high to get the certification, then it ends up having a reverse effect. So we would love to see that. I'm not sure the best route to get that message to the state, but we would love certainly to see them update that. So for us, we've tried to be as inclusive as possible, recognizing that there are some limitations to what we can do as one city, but certainly we would like to see the state make some updates to that.
And when you're advertising procurement, does the state help you reach these businesses, or you just advertise it in the normal, you have to reach out through a directory or you advertise in the normal newspapers or wherever you advertise?
Yeah, I mean, for us internally, when Milwaukie issues a solicitation, right, we are drafting that ourselves. We're putting it on the city's bid management site if it's formal. So we would have all our requirements in there. It would be up to the departments to identify ahead of time if there's somebody. I mean, if we find businesses that are known, we should be reaching out to them. Even if they're not signed up on the bid management site, we could easily email them and say, hey, this is out there and we invite you to bid.
There's not like a state newsletter or email thing that goes to the businesses like, here's the latest procurements from cities.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there is. The state's COVID website is actually pretty well in depth, and there's a lot of resources on there. In addition to just the directory, there's FAQs, and I actually wouldn't be surprised if they had something that went out. I'm not sure if they have a newsletter per se.
And that would be formal. If there is anything, it would be for formal procurements. For informal or intermediate ones, it really wouldn't be. And so that is us one of the reasons why there's a component of this to increase education and outreach is to help those businesses know where we are. Basically, one, we are interested in working with you. So keep an eye on what we're doing, and also actively trying to reach out to those businesses when we do have a procurement available that might be a fit for them. Because it is hard. I mean, all of the different public agencies out there, how do you know that there's something that you might be a fit for? So we're trying to make sure that we're proactively reaching out to these businesses to say, yep, you've worked with us before, or yep, you reached out and said you're interested. We're actually putting something out there and hoping that we can build that ongoing relationship with these businesses over time.
So with the big infrastructure projects, I mean, that seems like the biggest things we do, and they're kind of an exception. Are they or do we have to go for the lowest price, or is that just a practice? Is that a legal requirement?
Yeah, so for public improvement contracts for construction, lowest bid is pretty standard. That is definitely not the only option. We do have alternative methods. So we could do a design bid where you have one contractor that does the design as well as the construction. We have our CMGC, our construction management general contractor, kind of what we had for the library project, where we had a contractor that oversees all elements of the construction. And that would usually be a type that we would use, alternate method we would use for large projects like the library. Anytime where quality could be of concern in a construction project for us, an alternative method would be the way to go, and we are proposing that it's then required. But just lowest bid, that's standard practice and law for awarding a public improvement contract, which is why we were then proposing alternatives to that, require a certain amount of materials, go through a COVID certified business, or or require a specific amount of performance work, go through COVID certified businesses, where it could still be awarded to the lowest bid, but a percentage element or a dollar element is included in that. They would have to then.
So I do
their
have
bid
this
package.
I mean, certainly this has never been an area of law that I've practiced in, but do have this kind of recollection that federal contracting often does have a, like I said, they call it a set aside, actually, a minority business set aside, like a certain percentage of your subcontracts had to be led to minority or women-owned businesses. So, I mean, it wouldn't be a thing that I think is unknown to the contractors who do this kind of project.
Am I misremembering? We're not required. It's just standard operating procedure. We were required to take the look at it.
No, I mean, there are definitely other methods that we can use, like the alternative methods. But I don't know outside, not for public improvement, what else you would award based on if it wasn't an alternative method and it was just for construction.
Standards like these, right? The price would be weighed into it. But so would, and I get it gets harder.
Because it's, like we were saying, because there aren't points awarded like we would do with proposals or quotes or qualifications. We would, and we did. We had extensive conversation about how we could work in this to public improvement contracts, which just go to low bid. How do we, since there aren't points involved, how do we factor that in and make it fair across
Somebody has an idea. I'd love to hear that out.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Garley, Assistant City Engineer. So one way we could pull that in is we would put it in the actual drawings or contract, that the specifications, and state, hey, you're required to do so much outreach or bring on consultants with a percentage. So we could put it in that. So then it's built into the price, and then you would then take the low bid. Yes, we do have to take the low bid when we go that process, unless we find them at default and they get kicked out. But otherwise, we are going, when we go low bid, it is the low bid. So unless we find a fault in their numbers or how they presented their documents, then that's the only way to actually remove them. And they can protest or what or not, which we've done it before. I've had to remove people because they didn't actually, they didn't add up their bid correctly, and it was $50,000 more, for example. And so then the low bid was actually somebody else.
So this may never have happened. So this is purely a hypothetical. But what if we had used contractors in the past, a particular contractor, and they had done a horrible job and it caused all kinds of trouble, and then they went ahead and bid on the next similar project? Is there no way in the process to go, nope, even if they're a little bit?
There is a way. We don't have a list at the moment that says, hey, these are kind of blacklisted. But there is a process that we could take. It does revolve around definitely a lot of documentation. You're pretty much almost firing them from the job. So that's one. You terminate the contract ahead of time. You could potentially put them on this blacklist, so to speak. So yeah, I would say we haven't had the issue yet. We've been able to resolve items and things like that.
But yes, and to go on what Jennifer was saying, we do currently have a process within our rules where we could create a debarment or a suspension period for contractors that don't meet project and contract requirements. So yeah, if they didn't do a poor job or we had issues with them on the site, it would, and like Jen said, it would take heavy documentation, but yes, we have a process within our rules that could be done, but with you, I don't believe we've reached a point previously, at least
I've
not
avoided
my
the
time.
situation at the moment and haven't had to go down that route yet.
Work hard to try not to get to that point.
It's a temporary. I think you can only take them off for like 3 years.
Yes.
You can't take them off forever.
It's in what you gave us. I mean, that
It's in our current rules.
Those current
Yes.
rules in the packet.
So got it. Yes, it is.
To go along with what you just asked, Mayor, if there's a concern, if quality is a concern, that's when we would actually encourage one of those alternative methods. So that's really the goal here, is that with there being alternate methods, then you can move to quality, and then we're using points, and then we are requiring it under those circumstances. However, there are times where, and we looked at agencies across the country and locally looking for, has anyone figured out a way when it is a low bid contract, so when it is a public improvement and it's low bid, to figure out a way to blend those two. We haven't seen anyone who's successfully done it. So that's when you do look for ways to either split the contract up into smaller components, require there should be certain elements that do go to businesses that would be COVID certified or meet some other criteria that we're looking for. So we basically looked at ways to steer away from those public improvement contracts. However, we also didn't want to put particularly engineering in a situation where that's the only option they had. There are times where public improvement contracts are the way to go, and they're going to be low bid contracts. But there are elements that we could work with to try to make sure that we are still meeting our goals within that process. We also just didn't want to make this so restrictive that it became unusable for our agencies.
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand the direction the things you're trying to get at with your lines of questioning. I guess the question I come back to is do we have evidence that our procurement and contracting rules are going to eliminate the businesses we're trying to include, given that there's a certain size at which companies no longer qualify as COVID. Like it seems like there's a pretty smaller businesses are generally what we're looking at. So when we're talking about these large projects, I don't know that they're going to be bidding on those anyway. I don't know that I said that correctly. Jen, is what I'm trying to say.
I definitely hear what you're saying. And I think the exciting part from engineering is that we now have a mechanism to probably track this. So even though I can't require it, I can say, hey, to the contractor, I do want to know what businesses you're using so we can get that data back as far as, because I know a lot of my landscaping definitely probably qualify. For example, there is some smaller businesses that we use here and there for different things. So we're going to push that to get that contracting information, to get that data back so we can report on that, even though we're not required to do it. But it's exciting. It is exciting that we are looking at this and have the flexibility so different projects may be better at it than other projects. And so being able to identify that, utilize that, report back on it.
And I think there's a real benefit to asking that of everyone to some degree, because that is a huge public education piece that the city is putting out there, saying, these are our priorities. This is one of those moments, like budgets or moral documents. This is bringing contracting to the moral document kind of level. So I really appreciate that it's got that broad scope of applicability, and you've got that flexibility, and really appreciate the data collection, because I think that's going to inform us. And there may be a point where we go, hey, this is not achieving what we're hoping to achieve. Let's think about how we're doing this. So I think this is a really interesting development.
We'll also be able to add to the, to our database of like, oh, these are people that do qualify.
Right.
Maybe we want to bring them on a smaller project that we can direct to hire them for different things.
Right. Yeah, and it does, from council's perspective, it does mean that we are entrusting to staff to follow these values. I personally don't have a big concern about that. I think that it's clear that this is where we're at, and I think John has done a lot of good work, and others have done a lot of good work with staff to make it clear that this is the work we need to do to be who we want to be in Milwaukie. So
yeah, we'll also add to the staff reports. Hey, what did we do in the process? So you can hear about what things are happening, especially from the engineering. Talk about the engineering side.
Talk for yourself, you're good. But
yeah,
a good thing
it
to pass on
should
to
be,
everybody.
something that's added to the staff report and how we're addressing it.
And that'll be really cool, because then it'll come up every time we have a procurement that comes in front of us. And I love that. It makes that work visible in a continuous way.
Mm-hmm. And that's, with the reporting piece of it, that was, for me personally, it was important because there has to be a way to measure this and
to get the feedback from the businesses that are awarded or not awarded, or staff, and what's, like you said, what's working, what's not. We want to know so that we can make adjustments and improve.
Yeah, and that I really appreciate that too, as I'm learning very slowly what the barriers are for equity in business. It over and over is just having the cultural grounding and experience to know how to navigate the system. So the part where you're building in indications that, hey, this would be good for you to do, here's why. I think that's really a useful offering for some of those small businesses. It will encourage them to think about how to plug into the system and hopefully give them some tools to also do the work instead of feeling like they're on the outside.
I had a couple of more minor questions. One thing I noticed there was, and you mentioned it too, I noticed it browsing through the code, monthly project reports. Is that something that is required at a certain dollar figure or complexity of a project, or is that something we're going to require of everybody? I guess it sounds like it could be onerous for something that's relatively small.
So we had it in as a requirement for formal procurements. So these are going to be the larger dollar contracts that we have, to where the contractors would be required to submit some kind of monthly report on their utilization of COVID businesses. So yeah, it would be for the larger one. It wouldn't be our smaller direct appointment contracts.
On those projects, we're usually checking in periodically anyway. And so would that just be incorporated into a monthly progress report?
Yeah, these are like design and, or even long-term contracts, maybe like landscaping or something like that. So yeah, those are usually where we are checking in on a monthly basis with the contractor or consultant anyway. So it just made sense for them to include some kind of monthly report, which I envision could be pretty easily done when they submit their invoice.
Then there was a word in here and you also used it, debar. I thought that was a really interesting word. I'm not really familiar with codes using that word. And I wanted you to tell me what is debarring that is not excluding? Like it's used kind of intermixed with exclude and disqualify and debar. What does debar mean?
So for me, debar is more like a federal term. It's actually, we go to sam.gov. We do it for every contract, but it's absolutely required for any time we are using federal dollars in a contract that we check a contractor and make sure that they are not debarred. So either they have done something pretty significantly wrong to where they've been kind of excluded from being awarded federal contracts. And it could be for things probably like fraud. It would have to be pretty significant. That got them in trouble. So that's where it comes for us and how we have it written into our rules is that, yeah, it's not just, what was the word you used? Excluded. Yeah, it's not excluded. They may be excluded for, like Jen said, there's a temporary period of time, I believe it is 3 years, that we could not consider their bid or proposal.
Well, so I would just say, please make sure those kind of things are all clear with the different terms meaning, because we don't define debar in our list of definitions.
Okay, and I would be happy to add that.
Thank you. And then just one other thing that occurred to me when you were going through the dollar thresholds, 150,000 was a threshold. Anne has signing authority to 100,000. So would we be changing her signing authority to kind of line up with that?
That's not being proposed at this time.
It's up to you all. Sorry. You're good. It's up to you all. We've talked about it before. And I'm fine either way. So we can change it and increase it to 150 or we can maintain it at 100. I don't feel like over the last couple of years, I've brought you too many things where you called me after and said, why are you bothering with this? That's kind of our general threshold.
We actually got there when it was lower. I think it was at 50,000 or something. And you said, please stop bringing us all this. So that's when we increased it to 100. It's really.
Okay, well, I just would put it out there for, is it easier for staff to use $1, use one threshold for both things? I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter. Yeah.
We can ask them before we bring this forward in a couple months.
Yeah.
That'd be fine.
And I can run some numbers too to see what falls in between the 100 and 150 range.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
A note actually on language, back to your prior point about wording. One of the things that we're trying to do, and it's part of our, we're asking contractors to remove exclusionary language, or language that's unequitable. Language is evolving, and we've had this conversation before when we've talked about BIPOC, whether that, but as language evolves, what we're asking is, of ourselves, is to try to find the right word. And so we run into things like, for example, the word blacklist, which unfortunately, trying to find a replacement for it is tricky. So is it exclusion list? How do we find words that don't, apply a connotation that we're not intending? So I think we'll still be trying to work through that. And so we may come back and adjust these over time. Try to find better words for things like that. So whether it's debar, exclude, I think we'll probably still try to work on this over time. Google, as a company right now, Alphabet, the parent company of Google, has done a really wonderful job in the tech field, because the tech field is loaded with words that are really problematic. And they've done a wonderful job of providing language and some guidance on that. And so we might be turning to them of all companies, but they've done actually a really good job leading on that. And so credit to Kelly and to Brandon, also our IT director, who has asked for some of that language as we've tried to steer away from some of the problematic words that are out there that we use, but we still come across things where we have trouble finding a replacement for it. So what is a good replacement for blacklist? I don't know yet, but we'll get there. And so so we're still working through that. So thank you for that point. We'll need to work on defining some of these things.
Well, it's exciting.
Yeah, it's great work. We're spending so much money on capital improvement projects. It's just frustrates me that we can't somehow get this process engaged in that. But
Just so you know, on some of our larger projects, like City Hall, libraries, things where we are doing some design with the construction, we do consider these new procurement codes in those. So really what we're talking about where we're struggling with this is construction on roads more than anything. So I just wanted to make sure for the public mainly who's watching, we actually will be having a lot of these conversations around. You know, last night I was on a call with John. We were working on our new parks. And in that call, we were very specifically having a conversation with a partner who does qualify under this about how we hit our equity goals with those 3 parks. And it was a really exciting and fun night. So I just want to make sure people know we're talking mainly about how we do the road construction more than these other larger projects where we put funds. Thanks.
great work.
So I think just our only question for you guys is, would you like us to follow up on some of these things, come back for another discussion? Would you like us to follow up on these things and come back? And right now we're scheduled for May 3rd to adopt.
I haven't seen any major shifts that we're trying to make. If you guys come up with better, cooler ideas, awesome.
Yeah, right. Yeah, definitely defining department.
And you're taking it to the equity committee, it says, right?
Yes. We do that next week.
There are actually some folks there who know this stuff and may have some really smart, cool things to suggest. Yeah. So I'm all in for hearing what sort of feedback they have to say.
Okay. So come back.
Yes.
Okay, great. Will do. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Clay Brooks with the new City Hall update.
Okay. Hey, good afternoon. It's my first time being back in real life, so it's nice to be here. My name is Kelly Brooks. I'm the assistant city manager, and I just want to give you a quick update on where we are with New City Hall. And I really do mean quick. So I suspect this may leave you with more questions, so we'll have plenty of time to talk after I walk through some slides. And also you can talk at me while I'm going through the slides. So right now, I'm working through these items in this winter spring checklist. So I've been working on a project charter just to kind of basically wrap my head around what is the project. So we chatted about a month and a half ago just to make sure we're still on board with the 3rd floor major renovation, moderate improvements to the 2nd floor, and then some ongoing conversation about, you know, what, if anything, should that downstairs space be? So thank you for your input. I folded that in and have been having a lot of internal conversations with Public Works and Community Development and all of my friends at finance to try to just make sure we understand what the project is. I now need to convert that more into a project management plan. So it's become increasingly obvious that it's a small project, but it has a lot of moving pieces. We have a lot of different contracts that are going to come into it in different ways. So how to organize that and have that overall decision-making process that'll work for it is what I'm digging into right now. A part of that is stakeholder engagement. Now for this project, a lot of my stakeholder engagement work, our stakeholder engagement work is internal. So most of the folks that are most directly impacted are the people that are moving. So that's another major focus area for the spring is just how are we organizing? What committees are we going to have? What task forces are we going to have? Who's looking at the front counter, and how's that going to be structured so that it works for planning and engineering and all that. So working through those pieces. We also do need, we've talked about where we want things. We have a general layout, but we need some more space utilization work done to really understand why things would be in certain places and how much space, workstations we actually need, how much flex space we need, all of that. So working, actually, I was just over at City Hall this afternoon with a potential firm to help me to do that. And it became even more obvious because we've been there in a while, but they're in the basement. There's just so much stuff in the basement. And I've been here at the city long enough. We have a lot of stuff in random places all over the city. And we need a plan. We need a plan for all the spaces, even the spaces we don't need for workspaces and don't currently need for storage. We need to know why it exists and what we'd like to do with it. We will have the design contract in the spring. We will get that in place. The last time I was here, I was working off of a framework that worked really well for the Letting Library, and Layla had proposed for this project, which is an owner's rep, architect, and a CMGC. The more and more that I'm really sorry, I keep looking over there. So let me know if this whole side of the room feels ignored. But it's not big enough for that. It's too much contracting, like for this size of project. And so I actually went out, I did a request for qualifications for owners reps. We got a couple back, the proposals, and we're reviewing them. And the more we talked, and especially after having brought Andy Bird on, who I'll talk to you about in a minute, we believe we have internal capacity to do project management of this size, and that it will be in the best interest of the project to do that. So I've kind of moved away from that triangle that worked well for the letting, recognizing, I keep saying this is a little bit more like my kitchen remodel than building a new library. It's a lot of interior tenant improvements. And so to try to maximize our investment, we moved some of that in-house. And I think it's going to work, but that's a big change from the last time that we talked. For when we head into summer, we should know more about the design contract that we have and if there are architectural elements that we need to subcontract out. So the stairwell, potentially relocating that doorway to the entrance piece, anything, we'll know more then. If we need to go do that, we'll go get that contract. But it'll be all about getting the design done heading into the fall so that we can bid that contract out in the winter, and ideally start construction and renovations as early as we can, January in 2023, because that's when we come back into the building. We work, manage construction, finish up any relocation planning, get our furnishings all set in the spring and summer, and then move in the fall. And so I don't know why I stopped putting asterisks on that, but they all deserve asterisks. We have a grand opening, help give people tours. And then I think that's when we'd open up and start figuring out, okay, we've got these community spaces. Here's how you can reserve them and all that. So that's high level. There's a lot of tasks that aren't in here, but I just thought this would be kind of a high level piece so you could get a sense of what's happening in each season with the goal of being in the fall, moved in. And using it. Does that make sense? Okay. I picked that picture because I think it actually looks like a shirt that I wear. And
wait, that's not you.
That's not me. No, that's just like a stock photo that I found that made me laugh really hard today when I was making this presentation. So this is kind of the theme that we have right now.
It just gets like a snowy.
No, I couldn't find anyone else that matched. So
I don't know why this is tickling me.
Because it's hilarious is why. Because this actually was the highlight of my day. So anyway, so my role, I'm gonna keep laughing, is just kind of overall project coordination. I will continue to be the main person that comes and talks to you all and checks in and runs the stakeholder process. But Mandy, who Joseph hired, has a lot of great experience actually managing projects. And what we learned is that she's capable, and Joseph kindly they figured out how to structure it so that she can help us with some of the construction project management work. So she's really getting into it now. That's why I put the little blueprints next to her, because getting us to a biddable project is something she's going to be really involved with, and then managing that once it's actually in construction. Damien, we all love Damien. Damien's our facilities person, and I toured today again with the facilities person at Advantis, and there's just things that facilities people know that nobody else knows. Like the ceiling tiles are grooved, and nobody should have ever ordered them because they're incredibly complicated, and anytime someone takes them out, they break. That's what I learned today. So Damien's going to be really involved throughout, so that we're making good decisions. And he will definitely be on site and really engaged during construction as well. And then Kelly, who you just saw, she got a really boring little purple box because she's helping us, but it's very, very important. All of the contracting, I think when we're all said and done, we'll be at 4 or 5 different separate contracts. And she's helping me a lot to weave those things together and make sure that they're all on the up and up. Speaking of those, I think the next one you will see is interior planning and design. They should be able to do our space utilization study. They may be able and hopefully can do our relocation planning. There's so much furniture. There's a lot of furniture and a lot of workstations. And our primary sustainability goal for this project really is reuse. So we want to reuse as much as we can, and there's a lot to work with, but we need to be smart about it. So we're looking at firms that can help us do that. Architecture, if we need it, and relocation services, if it's going to be a standalone contract, which I suspect it will be. Oh, dogwood tree. Done. So what kind of questions does this bring up for you all? We are moving. I just don't have my time to show. I thought that I might be introducing you to an owner's rep, but I changed course. So I just wanted to be really transparent about that.
Are you feeling good about this timeline at this point?
Yes. Yes, I am. I think we're still working off, though, my timelines and my budgets, like the things that I've developed, enough to get us what I think we need in the budget that you all are going to be adopting. I am very much looking forward to that next round of refinement. And then I will feel better and more confident.
But we're confident that they'll be vacating by end of the year.
Yeah, they signed an agreement, yeah. Yeah, and they seem to be, again, I can't speak for them, but they seem to be cranking. I mean, I'm guessing they may ask for an extension, but I've never heard that. So they keep iterating to me that January is what they're working towards. So I'll keep you apprised. But I'm counting on being able to get in there and start construction. So. Yeah. And I will be doing kind of more. I'm over there more. So if you have questions or you're feeling like you'd really like to get back in there again at some point, let me know. I can go on the next one.
You determined what the natural gas use is?
I have not.
It's a generator.
It's a generator.
It's the backup generator, right?
Yep.
I mean, I know what's using it. I don't know the exact amount.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
it's that.
It's the backup.
It's just it's a backup generator. I apologize. Anything else? That's it.
Thank you.
Well, time. All right. That we will close the work session and see.
Hour.
Ooh, goodness.
Well,
I can shoot. Okay. Yeah, I've got some reading I can do.
Adjourn. Okay.